Welcome back. Before we get into today's video, take a second and think about the greatest athletes you have ever watched. The ones who made you stop what you were doing just to see what they would do next. The ones who seemed untouchable, unbeatable, bigger than the sport itself. Now imagine watching all of that disappear, not slowly, not quietly, but in the most public and painful way possible. That is exactly what happened to the athletes in today's video. And the hardest part, none of it had to happen. Every single one of these stories was avoidable. So if you are new here, make sure you subscribe before we start, because this is the kind of content we bring every single week. All right, let's get into it. What if I told you that some of the greatest athletes of all time were not defeated by injuries, not by age, and not by their competition, but by themselves? Today, we are talking about athletes who stood at the absolute peak of their careers, had the entire world at their feet, and then destroyed everything with their own hands. These are not stories of bad luck. These are stories of bad choices. Stay with me, because the last story on this list might be the most tragic of them all. Lance Armstrong. Imagine winning the Tour de France. Once, twice, 7 times in a row. You are the undisputed king of cycling. You fight cancer, come back stronger than ever, and the whole world loves you. Millions of people wear your yellow wristband. Children look up to you. Governments invite you to speak. That was Lance Armstrong, a man who became a living legend. He founded the Livestrong Foundation, raised hundreds of millions for cancer patients, and became a global symbol of strength and perseverance. For a long time, he was not just an athlete, he was a movement. But behind that myth was a system of lies that the sport had never seen before. Armstrong doped systematically for years. EPO, blood transfusions, growth hormones. The operation was sophisticated, carefully hidden, and ruthlessly managed. And what made it even worse was this. He forced his teammates to do the same. Doping was not optional on his team. It was the price of admission. Anyone who refused or threatened to speak up was intimidated, threatened, and publicly destroyed by Armstrong himself. Former teammates who tried to tell the truth found their careers ruined and their reputations dragged through the mud. Armstrong had the money, the lawyers, and the fame to silence almost anyone. In 2012, the House of Cards finally collapsed. The US ADA published a devastating report backed by testimony from over 26 witnesses, including many of his former teammates. Armstrong was stripped of all 7 Tour de France titles. His sponsors left within days. Nike, Anheuser-Busch, Trek, all gone. He lost an estimated $75 million in a matter of weeks. Then, in 2013, he sat down with Oprah Winfrey and admitted everything, with a coldness and self-satisfaction that shocked millions of viewers around the world. What remains is a man who did not just destroy his own reputation, but actively worked to ruin everyone who dared to tell the truth. On top of that, Armstrong received a lifetime ban from all competitive sports, sanctioned by the World Anti-Doping Code. The greatest cycling career in history, built on the biggest lie in sports history. Oscar Pistorius was not just a regular athlete. He was a symbol. Known as the Blade Runner, he competed against the best sprinters in the world using carbon fiber prosthetics. And he kept up. He set world records in Paralympic sprinting, graced magazine covers worldwide, and became one of the most recognized faces in global sport. He became the first physically disabled athlete to compete at the Olympic Games, lining up in London 2012 against able-bodied runners and holding his own. The entire world saw him as proof that human willpower has no limits. Brands wanted him, fans adored him. He represented something far bigger than sport. Then came February 14th, 2013, Valentine's Day. In the early hours of the morning, Pistorius fired 4 shots through a closed bathroom door in his Pretoria home and killed his girlfriend Riva Steenkamp. She was 29 years old, a model and law graduate who had been using the bathroom. His claim was that he thought she was an intruder hiding in the dark. The prosecution argued it was a deliberate act of violence after a heated argument. The truth of what happened in that bathroom that night remains deeply disputed. What followed was one of the most watched trials in South African history. The proceedings were broadcast live on television for weeks. Pistorius was initially convicted of culpable homicide, but that verdict was later upgraded to murder by the Supreme Court of Appeal. He received a sentence of 13 years and 5 months in prison. He was released on parole in 2023. A career that had inspired millions, erased. Not by a fall on the track, but by a single night that ended one life and permanently shattered another. Seoul, 1988. The Olympic Games. The 100-meter final is still considered the fastest and most controversial race in sports history. The tension in the stadium that evening was electric. 8 of the best sprinters on the planet lined up side by side, ready to compete for the most iconic title in athletics. Ben Johnson, the Canadian sprinter with Jamaican roots, explodes out of the blocks, pulls clear of the field, and crosses the finish line in 9.79 seconds, beating Carl Lewis and leaving the entire stadium in stunned disbelief. He raises his arm in triumph. For one night, Ben Johnson is the fastest human being who has ever lived. 3 days later, it is all over. Johnson's drug test comes back positive for stanozolol, an anabolic steroid. His gold medal is stripped from him on the spot. His world record is erased from the books, as if it never happened. He flies back to Canada, not as a hero returning in glory, but as the man who had committed the biggest fraud in Olympic history. The image of him raising that finger at the finish line became one of the most bittersweet photographs in the history of sport. What made it even more bitter was this. Johnson had been doping for years before that race. Investigations and testimonies that surfaced later revealed that his doping program had started long before Seoul. He was suspended multiple times throughout the early 1990s and attempted several desperate comebacks, none of which ever came close to recapturing what he had in that stadium. Today, Ben Johnson's name is synonymous with doping in professional sport. Not Lance Armstrong, not Marion Jones, Ben Johnson. Because his fall happened on the biggest stage, in the biggest moment, in front of the entire watching world. A career he had risked everything for, ended in 9.79 seconds. In the 1970s, O.J. Simpson was what we would call a superstar today. As a running back for the Buffalo Bills, he became the first player in NFL history to rush for over 2,000 yards in a single season. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, appeared in Hollywood films, and became one of the most recognizable faces in American advertising. After his playing career, he built a second life as an actor and television personality. He was charming, likable, wealthy, and respected across racial lines in a deeply divided country. For many Americans, O.J. Simpson was the definition of the American dream. Then, in June 1994, his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman were found brutally stabbed to death outside her Los Angeles home. O.J. Simpson was arrested after a surreal, slow-speed car chase broadcast live on television, watched by nearly 100 million people who sat frozen in front of their screens. What followed became known as the trial of the century. 134 days of proceedings broadcast on American television, dissected on every news channel, debated in every living room, and followed by audiences around the world. The acquittal split America along racial and cultural fault lines that already ran dangerously deep. Many believed in his guilt and saw the verdict as a catastrophic failure of justice. Many celebrated it as a rare moment where the justice system had been beaten at its own game. But in a subsequent civil trial, Simpson was found liable for both deaths and ordered to pay $33.5 million in damages. He spent the rest of his life largely in the shadows, with one more serious brush with the law in 2007, leading to a prison sentence for armed robbery and kidnapping in Las Vegas. O.J. Simpson died in April 2024, and to this day, he is not remembered as a football player in the minds of most people. He is remembered as a suspect. Tiger Woods was more than a golfer. He was golf. When Tiger played, television ratings doubled. Courses around the world reported surges in new memberships whenever he was winning. He brought athleticism, charisma, and a ferocious competitive intensity to a sport that many had considered quiet and slow. He became arguably the greatest golfer of all time. 15 major titles, billions in sponsorship deals, a truly global phenomenon who transcended his sport in a way very few athletes ever have. Then, in November 2009, Woods crashed his car into a fire hydrant outside his Florida home in the early hours of the morning. What initially looked like a minor traffic incident quickly unraveled into the biggest personal scandal in sports that decade. One affair came to light, then a second, then a third. By the end, media reports pointed to more than a dozen women over several years of his marriage. The carefully constructed image of the focused, disciplined, devoted family man collapsed in real time. Woods lost his marriage, his public image, and nearly all of his sponsors. Nike stayed. Most others walked away without hesitation. He disappeared from public life for months, gave an emotional public statement surrounded by his family, and eventually returned to competitive golf. But the aura was gone. The psychological edge that had made opponents feel beaten before they even reached the first tee never fully returned. Physical problems compounded everything. Multiple back surgeries left him struggling to walk at times, let alone compete. A DUI arrest in 2017, where he was found barely conscious behind the wheel of his car, painted the picture of a man fighting battles far away from any golf course. In 2019, he won the Masters in one of the most dramatic sporting comebacks anyone had ever witnessed. And for one brief, brilliant moment, it genuinely felt like the old Tiger was back. Then, in February 2021, a severe single-car accident on a California hillside shattered bones in his right leg and raised real questions about whether he would ever compete again at any meaningful level. Tiger Woods did not severely damage his legacy through doping or violence. He severely damaged it through a private life that was a double life. And in sport, just as in life, the truth always catches up with you eventually. These stories all have one thing in common. It was not injuries, not bad luck, not unbeatable opponents. It was their own decisions. Decisions made behind closed doors, sometimes repeated over years, that ultimately could with public life in the most devastating way possible. Each of these men had something extraordinary, a gift that most people could only dream of. And each of them, in their own way, chose to throw it away. Talent gets you to the top. Character decides whether you stay there. And that is it for today. 5 legends, 5 falls. 5 reminders that no amount of talent, money, or fame protects you from yourself. If this video made you think, or if there is an athlete we missed that you think deserves a spot on this list, drop their name in the comments right now. I read every single one. And if you want more videos like this, the subscribe button is right there. It is free, it takes 1 second, and it means we can keep making content like this for you. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.